to part 2. Part 1 would be the linear analysis of the various puzzle pieces of the face, the trajectories of the various forms, the modeling hasn't begun yet, but that's what we're going to start to do in this particular phase. So what you'll do is you'll find your image, your reference image, and we drag it into Photoshop, open it up. I'm going to deselect those rulers, and I'm going to go to filter the blur gallery. So again, filter the blur gallery, field blur, and I want it to be blurry but not too blurry. This is a little bit too blurry. This is not quite blurry enough because you can see lots of these little details, individual hairs, etc. You don't really want to see that. So you want to blur it just enough to where most of the detail is gone. So that looks about right. All right, so we're going to go ahead and save that. And I'm going to apply the blur first, save it on my computer, and then I'm going to title it something that helps me to recognize that it's a blurry version. And go ahead and save it. Okay, so that's step 1 in this part 2 of our chiaroscuro countenance. Okay, in this phase, you can see we've imported our photograph in. It's blurred to the degree that we want it to be blurred, and I've got my drawing set up. We're going to be using vine charcoal, only vine charcoal. This is the piece of charcoal that has no binder in it, so it's very soft and it's very easy to manipulate and erase. So you can see I'm starting to use the vine charcoal to just deal with the dark passage on the right side of his face. Sorry, his right, our left. I'm blurring it and blending it a little bit, but I'm not getting into detail. And I'm just kind of scribbling in and around the various forms and passages. I'm not drawing them, so I'm not using a line. I'm just using tone. I'm also using my kneaded eraser, as you saw there, pulling out some light. I do use line to help me separate my face from the background or to modify some of the edges, but I don't really use it to draw. It's more like I'm establishing a boundary that I tone up to, as opposed to coloring it in like a coloring book. So I don't want you to misinterpret that. And it's really just about working back and forth, both in and outside the figure. So I am using the negative space as well as the positive space. And I'm just using tone. And you'll notice that I do blend a lot, and that's to keep it blurry. What you don't want is a lot of focus, and you really don't want a lot of dark either. So it's about moving back and forth between just very loosely roughing in patches of dark, loosely roughing in patches of light, working from larger swaths of tone to smaller, working from smaller marks with your or larger marks with your charcoal to smaller marks with your charcoal, larger marks with your eraser smaller marks with your eraser, working with the side of the charcoal for larger areas, the tip for smaller areas, working with your kneaded eraser for the larger areas of light, and with your pencil eraser for the smaller areas of light. Here's a more close-up view of a different point of view, so you can see a little bit more how rough I'm making it. I purposely had that last image kind of zoomed out so that you weren't as aware of the mark making, but here you can really see the mark making very clearly. So I want you to notice that I'm not being careful, if you will, at all. Even with small details like the pupils, I'm not going to deal with a precise pencil mark. I'm not going to outline the shapes. I'm simply going to fill in and around the shapes. And you notice I'm kind of going in the same direction. Now I'm blending using my finger, and you can see that blending reduces the dark, but it also gains us a lot of moderate tones to bridge the dark and the light. Now I'm using my eraser, and I'm not rendering so much as just making large sweeping strokes with the eraser, large sweeping strokes with the charcoal. Now I'm going back with smaller strokes, but still not outlining. Just it's like a quilt, so it's a lot of different patches of tone. And the more I get into the tone, the more the tone is going to be smaller and smaller patches within the larger patches that I've established. So this is again about where you want it to be by the next class. Again, this is the second part, or part 2, of the Chiaroscuro Countenance. So when we next meet, this is about the degree of finish that you want to be at.